Right, welcome everybody to Bauma and the Ritchie Brothers stand, and we're going live today with our first Inside Edge panel from Bauma. And so thank you very much for joining us today. I've got some fantastic guests with me, and we're going to talk about the future of equipment management. There's certainly plenty of equipment to be managed out here, new, and it's going to be old in the future, so we're going to have to manage that effectively. And today, we've got a great panel with us, and I'm going to start by getting that panel introduced to you. I'm going to start with Matt. Matt, please introduce yourself, tell us all about you, and what's your role at Ritchie Brothers?
Sure, my name is Matt Ackley. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Ritchie Brothers. I've been here about 5 years in the equipment industry. But what's really interesting for me is I come from a tech background. I come from Silicon Valley. You know, I worked at places like eBay and Google. And, you know, my role here is, you know, you think about Ritchie Brothers, you think about our history. Our history has been in the live auction business. We've been around 60 years. But we're really in the midst of this transformation from, you know, a company that's focused on, you know, sort of off-site sales to more of a digital marketplace. And it's been really fascinating to watch that happen. It's been happening in the last 5 years as we become more digital, and the core of that is data and technology, and we're going to talk about that today.
I'm going to start with you as well, Matt, to talk about the industry. We're looking at an industry now which is digitalized. We're seeing a holistic approach to the way in which people are managing their fleets, managing their equipment, and managing the disposal of that equipment, using different technologies, 3D machine control, data, drones, etc. But technology advances are making information available to us, and in a timely fashion. So tell me, what is Ritchie Bros been doing to support the fleet owners that are responsible for their equipment, and how is that helping them to make the decisions and the future of that equipment management?
Yeah, I think the two things technology brings to the picture here are data and flexibility, right? So if you look at, you know, any marketplace that we've seen evolve over the last 10 to 20 years in the internet age, marketplaces throw off data. And, you know, whether that's pricing data, whether that's demand data, and that type of data we're starting to feed back to, you know, our customers so that they can make better decisions. The second thing is just the technology associated, the ease and convenience of doing business, right? So we've invested a lot, you know, in our platforms to drive things like categorization, search, right? To make buying, you know, incredibly easy for the end user, right? Access to global sources of equipment, 24/7, 7 days a week, wherever, whenever, and however they want to buy or sell equipment.
And that equipment is now seen as an asset, really, and it's like understanding the value of that asset. So you've added more services for people to understand that in almost real time, where they can get that data, haven't you?
Yes, and so if you look at a company in our portfolio, you know, and you're going to hear more from them in the next couple of days, Rouse, right? All of that data, you know, the purchase data, the sales data, the rental data, you know, bringing that together, packaging that up, supplying that to our customers so that they can make the most informed decisions about where, when, and how to sell their equipment.
And I think what's really interesting, we'll probably come on to it later, is actually it's that one-click decision making that people want now. They don't want to make a complex decision. They want the data, and they want to make the decisions here and now, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, you know, despite the decision to sell, there's actually multiple ways to sell equipment. And one of the things we've done is provide that flexibility. If you want to sell it yourself, great, we'll help you do that. If you want, you know, support in selling it, we've got channels for that. If you want us to handle it completely through auctions, we'll handle that. And then the idea is that with the data and the technology, it's just one click between all those channels, making it very easy for folks to sell equipment.
And that's a perfect introduction to Shweta. Shweta, you're from Machine Max, and I actually would call you a digital disruptor. Yeah. You've come into this marketplace to actually say to people, look, we can change the way you're using data and change the way you're running your fleets. And we're talking about the very latest equipment on fleets. One of our big fans is Flannery Plant Hire, one of fans of mine and yours, because you're using all of your data to support that huge, big rental business. Tell us a little bit about what you do, introduce yourself, and also, how disrupting the market is changing the way people are doing things.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I think the beer I gave you last time is paying right now. Yeah, so thanks for the kind words. So myself, I don't come from construction or rental background. I actually come from a product management background. And looking from outside in, we were looking at this industry and we were like, okay, why is there not a single universal telematics device which is existing? And that was the start for us. We're like, why can't we get data out of machines? Why is it so difficult? And that was 4.5 years back when we started this. And it has been a great journey for us. We focused on machines. We got our own sensors on the machines to connect machines. And then as the machines started evolving, we started getting the data out of machines in terms of OEM data, in terms of other sets of data like video telematics, load data, productivity data, because what we are trying to do is help our customers take decisions from data. Like Matt was saying, that there is no dearth of data. It is what you do with the data is the most important thing, and that's what we do. We help them make decisions.
And I think what's really important is that data is delivered in an easy to use format. How do you actually do that yourself to make it easy to make decisions?
Yeah, so you should speak to my engineering team. I take all the credit, but yeah, there's a lot of normalization and aggregation which happens there. A lot of multiple data sources which are there. You have to normalize it, aggregate, but the most important thing is you need to understand from user perspective what are the decisions they are trying to drive and create that abstraction layer. Just to give you some example, we were talking about safety before when the panel started. How do you make a workplace safer? Video telematics, collision detection, it's been there for 20 years. Now using that data and helping drive those decisions on safety, productivity, or for our rental users like Flannery is what we do.
And one of the things that's really interesting is you're talking about mixed fleets.
Yeah.
We're talking about an asset could be from any manufacturer here that's now and any new manufacturer that comes through. But it's about getting that data from the canvas, and it's actually about what you do with it. But you're moving forward now into monitoring the health of machines.
Yeah.
Now, that's really important because everything's about uptime and that kind of uptime guarantee that people give you. Tell us a little bit about how the health comes in, because that's going to tell right nicely to talk to Alex afterwards.
Yeah, sure. So when we start talking about health, we start talking about health of a site.
Right.
And machines being the physical backbone of a site, it's very, very important. Just to throw you some stats, an average utilization of a machine on a construction site is 4 hours in a day.
Really?
And out of that, 30 to 40% it is idling. So that's where the gold dust lies. Like you start surfacing those information when 100% of the fleets are connected, then you can start to drive decisions on based on utilization. What do I need to do with productivity? Based on idling, what do I need to do with emissions? Creating those kind of pull factors for our customers, and helping them.
And I think that's really interesting, because what we need to do is make sure the asset's sweating. We don't need to have the asset just ticking over. And I think, Alex, that comes in really nicely into Smart Equip. First of all, a lot of people might not know what Smart Equip is as an organization. So please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Smart Equip first before I interrogate you with the next form of the questions.
So my name is Alex Schüssler. I'm the founder of Smart Equip, and I'm also in charge of the international business. Smart Equip is really a equipment lifecycle management platform. We have about 675, almost 700 manufacturers worldwide using the platform to bring all of their parts and service support information into the mixed fleet owners. And the idea is that you have a piece of equipment that comes back from a job, and rather than spending hours looking at finding the right service documentation for this particular brand and model and serial number, it really gets injected by the supplier, by the manufacturer, into your workflow. So the idea is to facilitate the parts transaction side, but also to make service personnel much more efficient, and to improve uptime, like we all are.
And I think, for your side, it's really important that we sweat the asset that is the mechanic. because we're really short of skilled people throughout the whole industry. But what I'm seeing, particularly in the UK market, is there is a real problem with mechanics and their availability. So getting the right parts and making sure they've got the right elements to fix a machine is so important, isn't it? What are you doing to help people ensure that is correct and to make sure that they are using that time more effectively?
It's very interesting. A lot of people refer to us as a parts solution.
Right.
And there is truth to that. We are a parts transaction platform. Parts are very hard to identify, very hard to buy, getting the right part for the right serial number. But you're absolutely right. The bigger impact is by facilitating that part, you're really allowing the service technician to do the work that they elected for themselves to do, which is to repair machines, as opposed to chasing information, finding information, entering information. And the impact on service time savings and service efficiency improvements typically are somewhere between 8 to 12 times what you may be getting directly out of part savings. So, and what you just mentioned about the UK market, that's true in Singapore, it's true in North America, it's true all over Asia Pacific in general, and so forth. It's hard to come by service technicians, and it's getting harder, not easier.
I'd like to actually understand a little bit more about what you talk about, equipment life cycle. Because we all think about an equipment life cycle for an individual business taking that utilization in their 2 to 3 year cycle times and they're out. But that's not what we're talking about here in this connected panel that we've got. The life cycle goes on. And so tell me a little bit about how you go through a step-by-step process of talking about an equipment life cycle, and then how do you actually transfer that life cycle to the next owner of the equipment?
So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when we talked about life cycle, when we had life cycle economics, we thought about, okay, this is how much I paid for the machine, whether it was new or used, but that's how much I paid. And then 5 years from now, I'll sell it, and the difference between the two, that's my life cycle cost.
Yeah.
And that's true, but that's a very small part of it. So while you own the equipment, two other things are happening. You have a cost side and you have a turnover or revenue side. And the cost side are really, all of your costs are either parts or service.
Yep.
Machines consume parts, and every time they consume parts, they consume service. So all of our focus on the SmartEquip side has been to really reduce the cost of parts and service by making them operationally more efficient. And then there's, of course, the turnover side, as you mentioned just now. There's uptime, there's utilization of equipment, and making sure that you're using the commercially most significant use of that equipment at all times. So those are the sides. What you refer to in the very end, which is interesting, is we used to think of this, we used to say equipment life cycle, but we often meant the ownership life cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
You bought it, you're selling it, and how do I use it the best way in between? The equipment life cycle really starts once it gets a serial number until you sort of melt it down after multiple users, right? And there's more and more of our technologies now horizontally about passing that information along, in part, going back to Matt's introduction, so that you raise the value upon resale by having all the service and parts information that's pertinent to your ownership transferred to the next owner.
Now you're stealing some of Matt's thunder there, because I was going to come over to you, Matt, and talk about that, because the equipment life cycle that Ritchie Bros does, it creates a sustainable journey for the equipment to go from first user all the way to end user, wherever that might be. But information and access to that information and health of the machines and the checks that are done is really important, isn't it?
No, I mean, it's important in a number of facets of that transfer process that Alex just talked about. You were talking about idle time versus run time. So, you're talking about maintenance records, transparency, especially in the digital world, right? Transparency is key, right? You want to provide the most up-to-date information, on that asset, so that the proper value can be, achieved in that transfer process. And we've started to do a lot of that, we've done, integrations with companies to show, runtime versus idle time. We've started to show maintenance records on items that are for sale. And so what you're really starting to see is, once again, in this digital world, increasing that transparency. The other thing is what we've seen, and I was speaking at a conference a couple weeks ago, you've started to see the average age of the equipment we sell is going up and up and up.
Right.
Because of this is lasting long. This equipment is lasting longer. It's running better. So you have that sustainability element that's coming into play. We like to think of ourselves, this whole concept of the circular, life cycle of equipment, extending. We're a circular marketplace, extending the life cycle of those machines creating a more sustainable, environment. So it takes longer before you melt that thing down. It can be used over and over and over again.
I think what's interesting though, Matt, is the way in which you're looking at digital from a human concept as well. I recently had a little go on the virtual inspection, because as we talk about sustainability, we talk about online auctions and buying, it doesn't mean that you have to go to a yard anymore. Yes, it's probably the best thing you could do to go and pick out equipment, but now we've got the yard coming to you through another digital first from Ritchie Bros. Tell me about why you've done that and how it's being rolled out.
Well, so we have a couple of different pilots going on worldwide. So here, in Europe, we've started to enable video inspections where you can actually hook up and see a machine remotely. Right now, that does two things. One, that provides the buyer with more sort of real-time information, more visual information about the quality of that machine. Two, just from a pure sustainability standpoint, we don't have to fly inspectors all over the world to actually go and take pictures and notations and stuff like that. So really sort of shortening the life cycle of providing that information, which means the seller can sell a machine faster, which also means a buyer can have more confidence when they buy that machine. In North America, we're doing similar things. We're allowing people to purchase, online in real-time detailed inspections, where, traditionally at Ritchie Brothers, you kind of go to the site and inspect the equipment. Once again, we're providing technology, whether it's through more detailed inspections that can be purchased on the spot. Things like SpinCar 360 is something we've integrated into the platform, to provide that transparency, but also reduce the amount of effort it takes a buyer to go get the appropriate information to buy that particular machine. So on a number of fronts, we're kind of trying to shorten that process, but also make it more efficient.
And Shweta, one of the things that I had a conversation with one of the big tier 1 contractors, Balfour Beatty, just a couple of weeks ago. They've rebranded their division to Asset and Solutions Division from a Plant and Logistics Division. We're really seeing a change from the tier 1s that own some equipment, but also work with some of your team, like Flannery and the other customers that you have, to actually deliver solution from the asset. Now, how is your take on that? Because obviously there's a lot going into that and there's a lot of data that they require from your customers as well.
Yeah, so very good question. So there are a couple of things which are driving this. One is on the market side, there is a pull factor which is from government regulation. So sustainability has become a market force in UK, Europe. And if you look at India, where we operate, there is a regulation which has come out for any mining customer. They need to have video telematics because they need, from a safety standpoint, for a fatigue management standpoint, they want to monitor that. So this whole approach is, one side is market driven, another side is customers are demanding that. Construction has been an industry which has been, we all know the stats, like, it has been 1% of productivity increase over the last, 50 years or so? Yeah. And it is right time with all the things, with the chips cost coming down, with cloud cost coming down, everything is coming together. And now mobiles and everything is available and people can just see the data. So what we see is beyond assets, there is the whole notion of how we can, what are the pillars? And the pillars are productivity, safety, sustainability, efficiency, and visibility. These are the pillars where we see suddenly lots and lots of things coming together. And machines, there are very few variables. Machines, labor, subcontractors, and materials. Now, everything is started to come together, and what we do is we aggregate that data and present it back to the customers to drive those decisions. Whether it's a procurement department who wants to understand billing, whether it's a sustainability department who wants to understand emissions. So to your point, Balfour Beatty has moved away from calling it just an asset, now it is operations. And that's where we see that happening.
And Alex, it comes in quite interestingly to see how people are looking after their equipment. Matt mentioned there the extended life of new equipment that allows people to sweat that asset harder and actually keep it working hard for them. How has that affected the way in which people are working, from a maintenance and from an asset, let's say, love given to the asset instead of it thrown away after 2 to 3 years?
There's definitely a focus on longer equipment life cycle. That has become even more so in the last few years with supply chain shocks and the like.
Yep.
And you see geographically there's a wide spread. You see, for example, in Japan, quite commonly equipment is kept for 6 to 12 years.
Wow.
Considerably longer than what we're used to in either North America or in Europe, although they're learning quickly now to extend the life as well, because it's hard to refleet or to build up your fleet. And in the process, you're noticing that the life cycle management part of your total cost of ownership immediately goes up as well. Not just because you have more years of it, but as equipment goes up, service and parts increases exponentially. Right?
Yeah.
So you find there's a lot of that. So that's one trend that's very current and very noticeable, and that's what people are looking toward. Another one is really the division of labor. It used to be, again, 1-2 decades ago, that typically you'd buy machines and you'd have your dealer do the service and parts.
Yep.
And then that started swinging across, where the forward-looking dealers and the forward-looking manufacturers are saying, we're going to enable our customer service departments to really drive their own service, because that'll be less of a disruption to uptime. And we are going to sell more machines going forward in that particular way. That pendulum swings back a little bit with Tier 4 and other complexities that are coming up, where really it has to be done by the dealer. But either way, the information flow to have longer life cycles, starting with the manufacturer, whether it's to support the dealer doing the repair or their end user, it's very, very much focused on just extending the life cycle. In this case, not just the overall life cycle, but also the individual ownership life cycle.
And that really comes nicely back around to you, Matt, because what I'm really interested in is value, you know? So in this future management world we're living in, it's about making the value decisions, and those value decisions can now be made on data. And so when you have the data and say, actually, you know what? We might say over here to Alex, oh, we're going to extend it to 12 years like Japan. We actually might turn around and say, because of the data from Rouse, let's get rid of it after 2 years, because, you know, we can get the value out of that, we can reinvest in the fleet, and this is a critical stage. Look at outside in bauma today. What do we see outside? Stage 5 engines, electric, and some hydrogen, you know? So, you know, we're seeing a massive change in the equipment cycle that's coming out, and the types of equipment people are going to have to work with. So stage 5, completely different loading, completely different wear, and completely different engine types. So how are we using data, and how can we use data to make those right now or here and now or month-to-month decisions that get the value out of the asset, whilst also delivering better value and reducing CO2 and reducing fuel consumption for the fleet owners?
That's I have 5 words to answer that question. No, I think, look, I think as we start to see new equipment come on to the scene here, you know, we actually just released a couple, you know, earlier this year, our first benchmark report, you know, in Europe on sort of, you know, hey, what do those asset curves look like for electric vehicles?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You know, so that was a first shot at, now it's early days. It's tough to, you know, we've got some early information, and we've started sort of back our way into that. But I think if you look at the processes today, right, whether it's taking all this data, you know, today, you know, one of the more interesting things, we probably on a daily basis at Ritchie Bros, with all, you know, Smart Equip, with Rouse, we probably look at $150 billion worth of equipment every single day.
Wow.
And you know, flowing through our systems. And so when you start to sort of break that down, you start to then see, hey, what are those points? What are those break points where, you know, we were just talking about this, where, you know, does it make sense for me, right, to essentially, you know, continue maintaining this equipment, or do I continue to sell it? And as the new machine types come online, I'm sure you're going to see the same type of curves. We'll start to supply the same type of data, helping customers make those same types of decisions.
I think it's really important, Matt, that we understand the value of an electric machine, because we need to drive sales of these machines, because we need to be more sustainable. Again, it's the word of the day. But, you know, if people don't understand the asset value, and if people don't understand how we can actually look at that, inspect it, and have a fundamental asset value placed on it, then we don't know what we can do in the future and how we can invest. How's Ritchie Bros with that report and the way in which you're looking at electric engines now, motors in fact, going to change the way in which people can feel confident to say, yes, I'm going electric?
Well, you know, in order to purchase the machines, in many cases, you need to finance the machines.
Exactly.
And so, you know, we've done a lot of work with that data. We have a lot of relationships with a lot of the banks, right, around the world, particularly here in Europe, who are consumers of that, that type of data. So as we push that data into the, you know, that was the whole conference I was at 2 weeks ago on sustainability. It was actually the concept of green leasing. And so the banks are actually hungry for that data so that they can, you know, they can make the appropriate financing decisions to basically put the money in the hands of the people who can then go and purchase those machines. So that's where we've kind of started at initially, you know, it's driving that information out through the banks, the lenders, you know, who are you know, funding the purchase of those machines.
And Shweta, I know recently we covered an electric machine that actually has got their data accessible through your platform. So what's really interesting, again, it's saying to the manufacturers, we want data from the stage 5, we want data from everything else, but you've just integrated electric data from the Farasin telehandler into Flannery's fleet again. And so, you know, that comes into the dashboard that you've created. And obviously you've got to integrate that and compare and contrast. And actually you've got to understand from that data what are the applications for that product. So talk to me a little bit about the work you've done there, because that's groundbreaking.
Yeah, no, totally. So before I go back to the application question you have asked, just to let you know, but you asked to Matt about what's the data, what we see. We looked at roughly around thousands of telehandlers, and we figured it out. There is a 20% consumption happening on site. And I understand there are nuances, like you cannot remove telehandler just for the sake of it. But if a customer has got 5 telehandlers, that can be converted into 1 electric telehandler. That's totally a possibility. And customers have started to reach out to us and started asking those questions. How do I move towards electrification of my fleet, right? It's too much for them to think about. So piecemeal it and say that start with maybe telehandlers, start with smaller excavators, and we can provide that information looking at the data because we have so many connected machines, right? Now coming back to the applications, we've started to look at how the energy management is happening on site.
Right.
The demand of it. We are working with a couple of our suppliers. They look at what is the need of energy management. How some of the sites don't have power, so how do we start providing batteries and, you know, that kind of a demand management. They look at our data, they look at what are the sites, what are the machines available on site, what is the utilization which is happening on that, and then you can start to correlate with energy management and then provide those kind of infrastructure, because talking about machine is great, but you need to support it by an infrastructure there on site as well.
Yeah. So, Alex, that comes nicely to, because, you know, parts are now going to be required for electric machines as well as the new Stage 5 machines. And the way in which those work are very, very different. And we've got this sort of skills shortage coming through. I went to an opening of a training facility in the UK, and they said we need 250,000 electric-ready people, not just for the fleets that we're talking about, but for cars, to train people. But equally, we need that knowledge within the parts sector as how to manage that process with a motor, not an engine, don't we?
Yeah. Now, what's interesting though is the economics are the same at the end of the day, or the logic of the economics is the same. There's a lot of skill shortage, but we have that today by virtue of having a shortage of service technicians. What I heard is that it's actually easier to recruit service technicians in the electric world at the moment than it is in the sort of diesel world, as it's sometimes called. So I think there are at least these advantages, but in all cases, doing what you can technology-wise to make the service sector or the service technicians a great deal more efficient is absolutely key to it. And again, it's always multiplied or amplified.
Like that, there you go, amplified.
There you go, amplified. Good time. It's always amplified by the fact that every single time you increase throughput with a technician, you automatically improve uptime as well for the equipment.
Right, so now we're going to talk about the future, folks. What's coming down the line? So Matt, you know, Ritchie Bros seems to add new businesses all the time, new solutions to the portfolio. You've changed the way the business actually is as a whole entity. What's coming down the line that people need to look at that's going to help change the future of equipment management from Ritchie Bros' perspective?
I'll go with one word, and that's integration, right?
Right.
Alex and I actually, he talks, I'm probably stealing his thunder a little bit here, but he talks a lot about this. You can see the future, right? It all makes sense in your head. I can see, that's going to talk to that, and that's going to talk to that, and that's going to talk to that. But at the end of the day is how do we build that platform that really does provide that interconnectivity, that integration, so that it becomes seamless and easy to make those decisions. And where we are is, we are in the midst of kind of, we have a lot of disparate solutions ourselves that we've acquired over the years. Not just on the services side, but also in the marketplace on the transaction side, bringing that together, making that seamless. I just think that that's going to be the key. We've embarked on an endeavor to re-platform a lot of what Ritchie Bros has done with this ability. We sit there and we talk about services from an equipment standpoint. Internally, we're talking about microservices from a computing standpoint, right?
Yeah.
How do you build that environment such that all this stuff talks to each other and makes this whole concept of integration come to life?
Fantastic, and I think Shweta, coming to you with that, we have this whole industry that wants to be smarter, we talk about the connected work site, we talk about the digital rehearsal before you even get your fleet on site and things like that. What's coming down the road for you that you see is going to be a game changer in this whole fleet and equipment world?
Yeah, so Matt used one word, I'll use 4 letters, A, B, C, D. Accelerated adoption is what we see, bold decisions on sustainability, electrification, convergence of technology, and distribution of intelligence. And that's where we come in, data to decisions, right? There's no dearth of data. Adoption is happening very, very fast at an accelerated pace because of COVID and lots of other factors which are there. Integration, convergence of technologies, which is happening. But at the end, decision needs to be made on site, and that's where we come in, data to decisions.
Fantastic. And new data, new solutions, and also, Alex, the use of devices as well is big, because everyone's got a connected device nowadays. Where are we seeing that? Because quite frankly, if I've got a machine and now I've got an engine part and I don't really know anything about it, I could scan it maybe, I could put it into a new ecosystem. How do you think it's all going to work to make things better and more efficient?
The identification of components and parts is improving day by day, and that's something that we've been very focused about in the end. I also think if you're stepping into the future another 5-10 years, you'll see a far more common use of 3D printed parts. You're already doing it in things like oil platforms and space stations where it's a real need, but the economics are becoming better and better, and the idea of shipping something overnight doesn't make sense for an increasing number of parts. So there'll be part centers and that will actually create them. But I think, again, if you take a step back, I want to hook back to Matt's point, it's the mindset that's changing, right? Manufacturers used to sell machines, and they used to give you good parts and service support so that they would sell you the next machine. Yeah. Now, what they're selling you is the output of the machine. Nobody wants to buy an excavator. They want to buy the holes that the excavator creates. Right. And so what I, as a manufacturer that wants to drive your life cycle economics, will do is make that, increase the financial yield on the asset while you hold it. And if you now look at what Ritchie Bros is doing in this sort of new incarnation, it's the same thing, which is moving, as Matt described, from these vertical moments of where machines change hands and keeping in touch with the customer to do it again and again. In addition to that, now there's also the space between buying and selling where you increase the uptime. You increase efficiency, uptime, returns, decrease costs for service and parts. So that's really where everything is going, and as Matt said it very well, you enable that through the integration. It's not spot solutions that you use for different things. It becomes a life cycle solution that horizontally follows the equipment.
So some last thoughts as we wrap up, Matt. We're at bauma. It's the first bauma since the pandemic. We see a huge amount of the industry here. It's a vibe that is really electric, it's exciting, and all the people are willing to come and chat to everybody because we haven't seen each other for so long, and this is the first time I've met a lot of people. This show means a lot, doesn't it, to the industry, and this is why you're here. Your thoughts on the importance of this show and bauma to the future of this sector?
So this is my first bauma. Yep. It's awesome to be here. It's as a North American, right, you can start to see that ConExpo is the bauma of North America, just the sheer size of this show. But you know, Ritchie Brothers, you know, we sat here and talked a lot about technology and data and you know, throughout this entire presentation. But Ritchie Brothers was actually founded on the concept of relationships.
Yeah.
Right? And relationships and people are core to this business. I think they're always going to be core to this business. Relationships are core to what we do as a company. And even as more and more technology comes online, you know, I don't look at a world where it replaces relationships. I look at a world where it augments relationships. And that's really what we're about. So being here at bauma is about those relationships, and that's important for us.
Fantastic. Shweta, your thoughts on being here at bauma? Yes, it's raining, but we're indoors. It's fine at the moment.
I'm just happy to be here, meeting people without masks. That's such a win for me. But no, seriously, I was looking at the stats. 500,000 people come to bauma. So it is, you know, it is a place to be in. And I was speaking to one of the OEMs. They have sales target. They have lots. It's driving so much of energy, so much of enthusiasm into the industry. And to see that with your eyes, it's just amazing. So yeah, it's great.
Fantastic.
I love it.
Alex, final thoughts for you. bauma, we're here. Lots of people surrounding us at the moment, enjoying themselves and talking about the industry.
Well, the other thing that's remarkable, and remember the last bauma, and obviously the one before that, we are here speaking about equipment life cycle and the technology that feeds the life cycle. We're throwing this stuff around. But if I compare that to the mindset of the last bauma, which I know is more than 3 years ago for obvious reasons, it is amazing how far it's come. And it's amazing just walking around how many of these displays are about increasing uptime, increasing all of that. I mean, so a lot of the terms that we discussed here have already become second nature, and that was not the case during the last bauma.
So folks, I think that's a right time for us to wrap up. I have been Peter Haddock, your host. A big thank you to Matt, to Shweta and to Alex of our panel. Thanks very much, folks.